This is the Business Stuff Podcast. This is where I will share the lessons I've learned from advising thousands of businesses over almost 30 years. Each episode will give you practical insight to allow you to learn from other people's mistakes. I'll be pulling in experts from our team and the world of business, and together we'll make sure your business is giving you what you want. My name is Martin, and this is the Business Stuff Podcast. Hi, it's Martin from the Business Stuff Podcast, and I'm delighted to say I'm joined by, it's a first for the podcast, we've got three people on the podcast. We've got Jack, who you know, we've also got Mick Hogan. Hi Mick, how are you doing?
Good morning.
So what we're doing today is we're going to talk about the business of sport. We'll spend the first part of this talking about how to do things like increase your attendance, get paid for essentially getting people to give up the free time and come and see what you're up to. And the second part is going to be the listeners' questions, the viewers' questions, which you'll only be able to see on the B Daily Premium site. So there'll be a link below to go and see the second half of this if you want. Meanwhile, the first half is right here, right now. Mick, first of all, thanks very much for coming in. So the topic is the business of sport. Jack's here because he knows infinitely more about sport than I do. But do you want to just...
Right, yeah.
He's going to keep me right, hopefully. Do you want to just tell us, give us the 30-second intro, who you are, why you're qualified to talk about the business of sport?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Mick Hogan and I run my own sports marketing, our sports consultancy, MMG Sports Limited. I've been involved in professional sport for over 20 years now, so I've been CEO of 3 professional rugby clubs, Sale Sharks, Newcastle Falcons and also Wigan Warriors in Rugby League. I've sat on the board of Premiership Rugby. I've been part of the teams that have run 2 Rugby World Cups, so 2015 for the Union side and the forthcoming Rugby League World Cup that kicks off in 3 months, and then also worked as working with the ECB on cricket and the British Lions consulting. So yeah, varied, but probably predominantly within both codes of rugby.
Good, okay then. So you're the right man for this.
We'll find out.
We'll see. We'll see what the feedback.
Martin and we found out there were 2 different codes of rugby yesterday, so...
Yeah, I just start, yeah. If you can, no, I'm not going to ask you to start with why. So I mean, one of the places we can start and make just on the business side of sport, obviously sport and finance is dramatically different across the different sports. Yeah. And we get that. If we can just, I don't know if we can agree, but can we agree that it's primarily based on who wants to watch it the most? Is it as simple as saying that's where the money is?
Not necessarily. I think particularly with a lot of sports, you've got to look back in history, don't you? So if you are a sport that is probably the biggest or one of the top 2 shows in town, you will start with an advantage over sports clubs or sports that aren't. And the example there is, as a market, let's take Bath. Bath is quite a small town in very picturesque town in the southwest of England, but Bath Rugby Club have been pretty much the only show or the main show in town for decades, and consequently they're very successful. They sell out most games. They probably attract most of the corporate sponsorship in the area. And then you compare that to, say, a club that I've worked at is Sale. So Sale are the only club in the northwest of England. They are primarily based in Manchester, which is the second biggest city in the UK. So you would say that Sale should be infinitely bigger than Bath. But Sale have also got to compete with Manchester United, Man City. They've got rugby league all around, Lancashire cricket, a myriad of other sports. So they're in a hugely competitive market. And probably, the history of rugby union is that for most of that 150 years that Sale have been around, for 125 of them, the sport was amateur. I mean, it was very much a player sport rather than a spectator sport. So you've got to look at the history and traditions within various sports, and that's not just in the UK, but that's over the world.
Yeah, okay. So there's a bit of like cultural, historic, ingrained. You sport the team your dad did, you play the sport your dad did, or your mum did. But yeah, there's a lot of this is just almost built in, isn't it?
It's massive, and we see it here in Newcastle, don't we? If you ask most people why they support Newcastle United, it's because a parent took them along. And why did those parents do it? Because their parents did, and we very much saw that. I very much saw that at Wigan Rugby League. It's generational support. A club like the Falcons, where I've been lucky to work 3 times now over the last sort of 20 years, doesn't have that. Now, yes, the club dates back to 1877 and the Gosforth days, but as a professional team, it's relatively new. So, yes, you're probably getting the first generation that's coming through now where parents supported it, and it's almost handed on that rite of passage, isn't it? But probably their parents didn't support it. So there's no shortcut to that. You can't generate and create generational support over a few years. There are lots of techniques that you can do to drive attendance, and no doubt we'll come across a few, mention a few of those today. But that generational support that Newcastle United have, there's no shortcut to it.
It's interesting because I think there's a lot of nostalgia, as you said, and I think Newcastle United, certainly for me as a local lad, although I don't sound like I'm a local lad, there's a lot of that experience of being at Newcastle United is something that you can't forget about it, and it immediately ties you. And I suppose that's quite difficult to replicate, as you said, at a newer club.
It is, and I think every club's got its own little traditions and experiences. But what Newcastle United have done so well is just, I think, over the years, it's not just the club. I think it's the region, it's the people that live here. They've created something where people just have to go. I've always said it's almost one step short of a religious cult.
Well, it's certainly an addiction,
it's
isn't it?
It's an addiction. It's most cities.
Must be there.
Most cities build a cathedral at the highest point of the city. Newcastle built a football stadium, and at 3 o'clock every Saturday, and I know games are all the times, the bell goes out and people stop whatever they're doing, they go towards the cathedral that is Newcastle United. And no disrespect to the club in terms of what they've achieved on the field, but I think even the most ardent Newcastle United supporter would say they have underachieved over the last 80 years. However, 52,000 every week, that is
certainly
incredible.
The correlation between the energy put in by the fans and the result on the pitch doesn't seem to strike a balance, does it?
It doesn't, but I think more credit to the club that, everybody looks for success on the field, and I've worked at a lot of clubs where they've said, if we sign this player and this player, we're going to be successful, we're going to win, and that's going to generate huge crowds. That's not always the case. There are so many other factors to building a fan base, and more importantly, retaining a fan base, and Newcastle United have got a lot right. Well, and the big thing is, there's only one club every year, or 1 or 2 clubs can be successful. Most of the others aren't successful. So if you're building a business model on winning trophies and being successful, the chances are you're not going to achieve
it's
that.
flawed. You're right, because only one team can finish first, and there's only so many cups you can have a run at or a go at. Where do we start then? Because Jack's more involved in more grassroots sport than I've ever been, as you can possibly tell looking at me. But so let's say you look at any smaller football club, any smaller rugby club, tennis club, cricket club, squash club. It doesn't matter. Where do they start then? What's the starting point for generating revenue?
The starting point is that ultimately, the more successful you are off the field in generating the revenues, the better chance you have on the field. And thankfully, what it doesn't mean is the team that generates the most revenue will automatically be successful. And there's plenty of examples of that, and my club, Man United, are absolutely a huge example of that. Over the last 10 years have been pretty awful, but are probably, I don't know, by whichever way you want to measure it, they generate the most revenue. They should be the most successful. Thankfully, though, sport isn't about that, because if it was, you'd just get the owners around the table at the start of the day, get them all to produce the bank balances, and the guy with or lady with the biggest bank balance would win. It isn't.
And Leicester proved that as well, didn't they?
Yeah.
Their budget going into that season was nowhere near anybody else's budget, presumably.
But by and large, you want to give yourself the best chance by generating revenues off the field. And I think the biggest secret to success there is what is the mix of those revenue streams. And you don't want to rely on just 1 or 2 because
the gate is seasonal, isn't it?
The gate is seasonal.
The gate is the gate. And it's the excitement on the pitch that drives the gate. You can't rely on that, can you?
You can't rely on that, but it is definitely the bedrock of your commercial success, because the more people you can get coming through the gates, it's regular income. Do you know what? Sponsors want to pay more then for
seeing leverage those bodies, can't you?
Yes, and there's an upsell as well. If someone comes through the gate, then they're going to buy a beer.
There's a secondary spend. Ultimately, TV companies want to see full stadia as well. That's why the Premier League and the NFL have the biggest TV deals in the world, because you see full stadium, it looks exciting, it is an event. You know, so it's massively important to get your attendances up and as many sellouts as possible. But it's not the only revenue stream. You know, we've talked about TV revenues there, sponsorship as well. There's match day secondary sales, but clubs can go too far as well. So clubs can, I think, branch off then and almost use their brand and sign licensing deals in areas that they shouldn't. You know, and there's a very loose association now, I think, particularly between a club's, say, mark or brand, logo, put it on a credit card. You know, what has a sports club got to do with offering credit card service? I personally think that's too far. Others disagree. So
it's interesting that you said you want as many sellouts as possible, but then sellout is a term that's used negatively as well. So you're just doing that for the money. You're just going for the money.
Massively, and it's a great point. And the fans have got to understand that on one hand, the club ultimately needs to make money. You know, and I do think with a certain section of sports fans, a lot of it football fans, they resent it if the club makes money, because they think that money should be further spent on players, and owners should effectively tip in every month. If you took that model to the stage, they would be horrified at that. Every single major sports club in the US makes money, because if they don't, they would probably be run out of the league, or they would bring in a different management team. You know, we're sat here, you know, at Robson Laidler. If Robson Laidler didn't make money year on year, you wouldn't be here. So there really should be no shame in making money. But I think where the fans have an issue is if they see money coming out of the club and perhaps not being invested in facilities within the stadium, or in their view within the team, and the team starts to languish, that's when you get friction between the fans and the management of the club.
Because the fans want to chase the trophy and be in with a chance of a win. They want to win more games than they lose, and
Hey, look, it's everybody's release at the end of the week, isn't it? You know, professional sport now, particularly football and NFL, I mentioned, it isn't cheap to attend. You know, people spend a lot of money on tickets, and then when they're there on food and drink and programmes and the whole day. It's your release at the end of the week. You know, you work 9 to 5, you work hard. It's the chance to go along and with friends, with family, and just let off a bit of steam and be entertained. And if they feel they're not getting that, they're going to question why they're spending the money on it.
Do you think, Mick, that part of the change in face of sport, certainly from when I was a kid, standing at the Gallagher end, getting crushed against those concrete barriers, you know, wondering why the back of your legs were wet, and that, you know, those days, awful days. We look now, there's a lot more family, there's a lot more, you know, younger kids, it's a lot more welcoming. Do you think that is like a necessary thing? It's happened with pubs as well. Pubs are now, they're not just somewhere you go and get lashed, you go there for a meal, you take the family, you have a Sunday lunch. Is there a link here that you have to be more welcoming?
You have to be, because ultimately, as sport, you're not just competing against the club from the same league or the same sport down the road. You're not just competing against other sports, you're competing against the whole entertainment industry, aren't you? So at the weekend, we can go
3 hours on a Saturday, you've got to be worth coming. If it's not,
you're not just potentially going to go to another sport, you're going to go to the cinema, you're going to go to a restaurant, you might go to the pub, or even, you know, we're actually competing within sport as well against the rights we've sold to TV companies. That product on TV now has never been better.
Yeah.
And it's very easy to sit in your armchair and watch Sky Sports or BT Sport, multiple camera angles, all the stats you want, fantastic commentary, insight, walk 5 yards to the fridge and get your own beer that you perhaps haven't paid as much for as you would at the stadium. That's what we're also competing against as well. But we've always said there's nothing like being there live.
But ironically, you don't want to watch a match where there's nobody in the ground either.
Correct. So it's a balance.
Yeah, it's got to be worth it, hasn't it?
What I wanted to pick up on was the sponsorship, because all you see as an outside person is you just see a headline where X club has signed a sponsorship deal for X millions of pounds. But I'd be interested to know kind of what goes on in the background. How do those relationships get broken and ultimately those deals get made?
Sponsorship has massively evolved. I think 30 years ago it used to be more, it's almost a benefactor, almost a
A local rich lad.
Yeah, you know, engaging with somebody that knew your sport and was prepared to put a few quid behind it.
Probably want the write-off against their profit. So say, well, I'm going to give you some money anyway. I may as well
Possibly.
get the write-off. What can we call it? We'll call it sponsorship.
Yeah, I think the big thing now is it's about listening to sponsors. So, you know, I've worked with teams over the years, and I've always said that, you know, your first meeting with a potential sponsor is you go in and you listen. We would never ever present anything to them. We've got to understand what that organisation wants to get from an association with our club, and for lots of sponsors, it's lots of different reasons. Some want absolute brand exposure. They may have a new logo, they may have a new products or services they're bringing out. It's all about branding. Others want business development, so, you know, are you putting something to them then that has business development opportunities? Lots and lots now want community engagement. Everybody wants to be seen to be doing the right thing. Lots of organisations, you know, it's fantastic to see have a real purpose to change the communities in which they reside. But perhaps they don't know how to do it. Well, we as sports clubs can actually help you with that, because we're constantly engaging with schools, with the local community on health, education, social inclusion projects. So listen to the organisation, understand what they want, and then we have a solution there. And a solution might be across accessing our players, social channels, events that we can put on, stuff around matches, hospitality, branding if that's what you want, on stadium, kit. No two sponsorship arrangements are the same.
That's interesting, because not to get a plug for Robson Laidler, but we try not to just say to clients, this is what you need, the same as every other business. Yeah. Every business has different needs. Yeah. And it's the same with anything. You know, if you're building extensions on people's houses, you've got to listen to the person. Well, what do you want? What kind of space? What are you going to use it for? How many people are going to use it? And it's quite interesting, because I would imagine a lot of, I don't know, but do a lot of sports clubs get this wrong and just think, well, people will want the name on there, they'll want that, they'll want 20 tickets a week, and that's that price. Do a lot of people approach it that way? Whereas they should?
Thankfully, not as much as it used to be. What it used to be, you'd get sponsorship things that were tiered gold, silver and bronze. I mean, straight away, who wants to sign up to say they're a bronze sponsor? It's almost saying you're third best. So
it wants to be the crap sponsor.
Yeah, it's taking terminology like that out, and a lot of clubs in the past, thankfully not now, as I've said, had not bespoke, but set sponsorship. Here's what you get this many tickets, this player appearance, your logo goes here, and it costs X. Well, you haven't even listened as to whether they want that or not. So it's important to listen, and then, you know, hopefully you can come back and present something that ultimately helps the sponsor tell their story. That's what we're about. We're about the sponsor has something to say, whether that's to existing clients, new clients, its own staff, the community it works with. They've got something to say, and what they can do is, via sport, tell that in hopefully quite an exciting and innovative way that stands out from just advertising, or stands out from just itself doing its own social campaign.
Good.
I suppose another question to talk about is I think we'll probably cover this a bit more in part 2, but just kind of a teaser on this is just the sustainability of sport. And do you think, because there's a lot of both football, rugby, there's a lot of rich people in the game that basically pump money in. Do you think that is sustainable? Do you think that model is, do you think we're in a position where that model could possibly change? Do you think it's going to burst?
I'm not sure it's going to burst. I think it does need to change. I think it comes back to what I said earlier, that clubs ultimately need to be sustainable, because if the owner or the group of owners walks out under a bus tomorrow, you know, the question is, could you make payroll at the end of the month? And there are still professional sports clubs out there that couldn't do it. So, you know, when you look at, I'll go back to rugby union, still the business model is find 12 or 13 rich individuals who can all support a club and keep them involved as long as we can, but ultimately at some point they will either run out of patience or run out of money, and then hopefully we can get somebody else in behind them to pick that up. I think the good thing about sport is, and you've definitely seen it with the Premier League, and you see it whenever there's a sale of a big club goes through, whilst a lot of them are built on debt and they lose money year on year, ultimately they're gaining value, you know, at a rate faster than that debt is building up. So I think the model for a lot of these individuals is, yes, I might lose 1, 2, 5 million a year, but as long as the value of the club is going up by 2, 3, 10 million a year, then ultimately I do have a get out at the end. But you've only got to get out if somebody's going to buy it.
Well, I was going to say that does rely on then there being someone who will buy you out.
Yeah.
And if because we saw it, I think, when Newcastle was bought, all of a sudden there was new rules brought in, you know, Man City and whoever the other club were kind of quite happily being the richest clubs and not cared, and all of a sudden there was competition, all of a sudden start lobbying for, I don't know, amounts you can spend on things, and, you know, financial controls, etc., which actually makes a club less attractive than to the very people who wanted to buy the damn thing in the first place. So it's quite interesting that.
Yeah, there's lots of ways you can value a sports club. Some of it is built on what is the value of the league. You can see that with the league-wide sponsorship deals that go on, particularly the broadcast deals that go on. And ultimately, as I say, if that value continues to grow and grow, then I think there is a bit of comfort in the fact that you're losing money year on year. But to me, that is not a long-term sustainable model. And you would want the organisation. Yeah, you might have the odd year where you lose a bit of money, but it's like any organisation. If you lose money one year, but you're making it in 7 or 8 of the other years, then overall you've got a viable business that's growing and is gaining in value. So it's a balance. It really is. And I think the biggest area where clubs potentially fail is that we chase success. We think that buying X, Y, and Z players will lead to success on the field, which will mean more sponsors, more fans want to get involved. And to a degree, that's true. But you need to, there are some really good examples of clubs out there and businesses out there that actually are very successful, but actually haven't had the success on the field. So that's the model that you want to get to.
Yeah, and if we move away from the kind of the wealthy side of sport at the minute and to probably, I doubt the new owners of Newcastle are watching this podcast for tips. I'm sure they would take your advice, but they're probably not watching us. But more likely will be the smaller, local, community-based clubs. And it sounds like what you're saying is you've got to become something in the community, a reason to go there as well as sport, not just sport.
Massively.
Is that a fair point? So you need your fun days, your festivals, have engagement dues there, any reason to get people in the club, and hopefully then try and convert some of them to fans.
Yeah. Some of the most successful clubs, be that at amateur level, semi-pro or right at the top, what they do away from the rugby match or the football match ultimately defines success. So, you will play, 20 home games a year? You wouldn't dream here at Robson and Laidler of opening this business for 20 days a year. You would probably fail, I'm guessing. It's the same with the sports club. If you're only operational on those 20 home match days and you have a poor season, or you have poor weather, or there's other, just look at what we've been through where crowds weren't allowed into games. You're probably going to fail. So
you don't sell as many pies or tickets.
Let's drill it down to the local community club level. You're only going to play every other Saturday at your clubhouse. Well, that clubhouse needs to be utilised in different ways. So you're right. It's 18th, it's 21st, it's weddings, it's wakes, it's the local yoga club coming down using it during the week. Because every single drink they buy or pint they buy, those people may not have any interest in football, rugby, cricket, whatever it might be. But every pint they buy, there's a percentage of that is being retained by the club to be able to be spent on the sport, and that's where you can drive some real success.
So in that respect, you actually compete, again, to go back to your original point, you're competing against every other form of entertainment locally, aren't you?
Yeah, you are.
So as a sports club, you're also competing against the local social clubs or the wedding venues and the engagement do places, or just the local pub.
Yeah.
You're competing for customers as well, aren't you?
Yeah.
As well as fans.
You are. But if you're embedded in the community and you're seen to be doing good in the community, and you've recruited well, and you've got lots of members as a community club, then you've got a better chance of that, haven't you? So if there's a little 8-9-year-old player and then one of their parents suddenly has a 40th coming up, if the kid enjoys being at that club, there's every chance that if dad or mum is planning a 40th, then I'll use the local sports club where my son or daughter plays.
Interestingly, so I've got a 13-year-old and 9-year-old. I think we've literally had 1 or 2 birthday parties across probably 20 a year for the last 10 years that have ever been linked to a sports club.
Yeah.
We did something at the tennis club up the road, and there was one on a five-a-side court. That feels like a massive miss there.
It does.
Kids' parties, because
yeah.
is that not what you want? You want the next generation coming in and
Yeah,
giving
you
it a go,
do.
don't you?
And we always looked at it when we were at the Folk, it's that cross-selling. We effectively had 2 or 3 different businesses under one roof at the Folk. So we had the rugby side of things, but we also had the off-field as well. So there were tens of thousands of people came to the stadium every year that knew nothing about rugby, but were coming for business meetings, for
Expo,
all those things, coming for birthday parties, wakes, whatever that might be. And there were also lots of businesses coming on match day to enjoy corporate hospitality that had a requirement for meetings or away days. So when you look at it, you want to try and you want to say to these business people, do you know what? You're coming here every Friday night or Saturday, but why don't you have your away day here on a Tuesday or Wednesday? And all these people are coming during the week saying, well, you know, to get in now, you know how easy it is to park, you know how great the facilities are. Why don't you try a game? So I think at first we missed a lot of a trick on that, but just look at the number of people that are coming to your facility, probably only for quite a narrow 1 or 2 of your offerings, when actually you're offering 6 or 7 different things.
It's interesting because Roy Keane famously, criticised the prawn sandwich brigade. I was thinking, was it sandwich?
Yeah.
Yeah. The only prawn sandwich I've had has been from Boots, I think. A prawn cocktail maybe, but prawn. So yeah. So but you kind of have to have that if you want to get to those higher levels, don't you?
You do, and I think
because that's an audience you can tap, isn't it?
It is, and it's an audience that I think gives at least 2 benefits to the club. Number one, they will probably pay more for their ticket or to be there than the man and the woman on the terrace. But by doing that, they're keeping the price down for the man or the woman on the terrace.
Yeah.
And ultimately as well, if you get the prawn sandwich grade, we prefer to call it the premium market in there. It can lead to conversations then that hopefully they have over the years have a great commitment to the club. That might be through sponsorship, or it might be through bringing hiring the facilities on non-match days,
not non-sport day things. Yeah,
it's interesting because we always talk about understanding your ideal customer, your customer persona. But for you, that's obviously incredibly difficult. You almost have 5 or 6 different personas that you're attracting, because you're obviously a certain persona is going for corporate hospitality. Meanwhile, you're also trying to appeal to as many people as possible to get them through the door and through the gate, be that families, old and new, kids. So, I mean, it's an incredibly difficult challenge, I suppose.
It is, and this is where I think data and insight are absolutely crucial. The data and insight are massive, or should be massive, across nearly every organisation, whether you're in sport or not. But
so what you're saying, Mick, is they've got to understand their numbers, which is handy because we're back to business.
No, it's absolutely massive, and
you've got to know the mix of streams.
Clubs I've been in, we've always tried to work off CRM. CRM is the holy grail. Trying to get one view of the customer who maybe might have bought a ticket, might have bought a shirt, might have used the facilities on a non-match day. Just trying to get that one view is difficult to do. But if you get a system then where your data is organised, you can really start to analyse what's working for you, what's not. But again, we go back to that cross-selling. But we've got this section here that always buys a shirt. Yeah. Right, actually, can we offer them something in hospitality as a reward for that, and get them interested in hospitality? And who knows, from that, some of them may spend a bit more. So data and insight, absolutely massive. Going back to sponsorship as well, you've got to listen to what the organisation wants, but you've got to know everything about them, and you've got to know your own stats as well, because a lot of the time, the sponsors, when they're talking to you, whether that's on a tournament basis or a club basis, they at times know more about your audience than you do. So they will ask you questions about your audience. They already know the answers, but what they're looking for is, do you know and understand your own audience? Because if you don't, then actually I'm probably not going to be looking at a partnership with you.
Because getting your name on a shirt is great. How many people are going to wear the shirt? How many people are going to buy the shirt? What's your attendance figures? What's your audience? What's your TV? If you spend a lot of money, you want all of that data, don't you?
Yeah, look, when we used to do sponsorship proposals, I'm talking 20 years ago, before data was as sophisticated, you would lead with, you're going to get your name right here on the shirt, you're going to get so many player appearances, so many tickets, and right at the end we'd say, oh, and you'll get access to our data twice, 3 times a year. That's changed now. Data is right at the top of the offering, because most times now, I would say that organisations that want to partner with you as a sports club or a sports tournament are looking at the audience that you can offer them, right? And it's a way of talking to that audience in a really positive way, because everybody wants to hear from their local sports club. If you're a fan of Newcastle United and Newcastle Falcons, when that e-zine comes through 2-3 times a week with here's the team for the weekend, or here's the match report, here's the exclusive interview, everybody wants to hear from the sports club. No disrespect to washing machine companies, if they send out a CRM or an email, there's not many people going to click on there and find out what the latest spins per minute are on the latest model. But through sport, we can really, really bring the message from brands to life.
Because you've got a regular product. The product is the same. You come into a match, but every match is different. There's something, the thing riding on the match is different every time. It's very easy to pump someone up about this week's game, isn't it?
It is.
So why? Well, yeah, great point. Why would you miss that? We like clients to use the data as well. So we've got, it's not sports business, but sports related. We've got a business who we help them put in a till system, and they identified the different things they sold on different days. And we realised that on match days, they were in Newcastle, on match days, the audience wanted to be in and out, and they bought certain things. So we got that data from their till and helped them to use that to then turn around people quicker on match days and sell more on match days. And it was, it's just a great link to then, you've just got to know that data, haven't you? And I think now, data, software and systems are so much more accessible because they're so cheap that there's no excuse now. You haven't got to be a massive club now to have a CRM system. No. Or to have a till that's quite sophisticated. It tells you trends, timings of sales, the types of sales. There's really no excuse, I think, now.
No, I absolutely agree, and I think more and more you're seeing those semi-pro clubs and even community clubs investing in data, and it's not just understanding about who your members might be, but the communities that you live in as well. So if you know that you've got 20,000 people within half a mile in any direction, there's a certain offer you can make to them, and similarly, if you've only got 20 people within 100 miles, then it's perhaps a very different offer.
Yeah, great.
In terms of data, because data is obviously very important on the field as well, do you think that, which came first, was the data revolution more on the field and then it's come off and come into the back office, or do you think that's gone the other way where?
I think they've probably kept tabs with each other. Probably, if I'm put it this way, if the head of sport or the team manager or the director of rugby comes wanting a data system, and the head of commercial comes wanting a data system, usually the owner will back the head of sport. So the sports team generally gets it, because again there's this idea that we have to be successful. Any edge we can get, that extra 0.5%. I'll be honest, frustratingly for us at times, off the field, we'll ask the same question. We'll ask for probably less of an investment, and sometimes that doesn't get granted. And it's just about being confident that any support you're asking for in data will give a return, and it's about presenting. It's no different, I suppose, to this organisation. You're presenting to the board to say it is an investment. It's going to cost money, but we believe it will return X times that amount of investment, and return it in a good time. We're not going to have to wait 5 years down the line before we see a return on this.
It's interesting because there's a sports club fairly local to here where we use some of their facilities sometimes, and the ops manager is got to be very careful here, but gets very annoyed that the committee undersell the products and services that he delivers because they're not on the pitch. Yeah. So the services are really cheap. They're really good, but they're really cheap. his time is devalued quite a lot because it's not seen as, it's seen as just an ancillary thing, which we kind of do that, but this is all we care about. But listen, Mick, we should probably finish up on the first half of this. Can you give sports club owners out there, give them one tip, one thing that you think most of them are getting wrong, that if they just start there, that's a good place to start?
I think the biggest thing I've always looked at is once you have somebody that's signed up to be involved in you, become a member or be a sponsor, is you've got to hang on to them, because it is probably 3 to 4 times harder, more expensive to find a new customer than it is to hang on to an existing one. So around about 25 years ago, I worked for a guy called Shane Richardson. I was involved in a club called Gateshead Thunder, who got parachuted into Super League, basically International Stadium. It was probably too soon for them, but Shane was fantastic. He could sell anything to anybody, but he could do that because he really, really understood what people wanted. And his 2 golden rules for sports clubs is, number 1, give people a reason to come. You know, just saying that we're going to win this weekend isn't a reason to come, but doing a community programme or doing a really good marketing campaign or doing a special offer, that's a reason to come. But the biggest bit there, his second rule was, don't give them a reason not to come back. Right. The only 2 things we can't control, the weather and the performance on the field, but everything else we can. How they're welcomed, is the place safe, is it nice and clean and tidy, have you got enough staff on, is the food offering right, can people get there on public transport, can they park well, is it, you know, all those things are a reason why somebody might not come back, and we're in control of all them. So stop worrying about the results, you can't do anything about that once the game kicks off. As I understand, there's not one person in the world can control the weather. There's 1 or 2 think they can, right? Take those 2 things out of it, you can control everything else. You've spent a fortune in time and money to get that person there. Don't let them walk away.
You can get people in and out well, you can treat them well, you can make them feel special, but yeah, you're right, you can't always guarantee the win, so there's got to be more than the result.
Correct.
Listen, Mick, that's been fantastic. We're going to move over now to the second part of the podcast, because we're going to say goodbye on the business stuff. If you want to see the rest of this, where we put questions to Mick, you've got to go across to the B Daily Premium site. The link is down there. But yeah, Mick, so we actually got far too many questions to actually, we're not going to get through all of these.